In 1947, an improbable bestseller redefined one of the most remote regions in America, a place long considered impenetrable and dangerous. Author Marjorie Stoneman Douglas saw the Everglades differently, as a vital, invaluable ecosystem, not a useless swamp.
Nothing anywhere else is like them. Their vast, glittering openness, wider than the enormous visible round of the horizon. The racing free saltness and sweetness of their massive winds under the dazzling blue heights of space. They have always been one of the unique regions of the Earth, remote, never wholly known.
The Everglades had been essential to South Florida's rise from a remote backwater to an urban and industrial empire. Now, Douglas warned, the vast wetland was dying.
The story of the Everglades is the story of man's quest to drain the swamp, to reclaim and develop and improve the Everglades.
We dug canals, we fortified a lake without really understanding what those consequences would be.
They didn't really give any thought to how the natural system worked. It resulted in large-scale ecological collapse.
The endless acres of sawgrass, brown as an enormous shadow, where rain and lake water had once flowed, rustled dry. What had been a river of grass and sweet water, that had given meaning and life through centuries, was made in one chaotic gesture of greed and ignorance and folly, a river of fire.
In winter 1877, a steamboat plied the waters of the St. Johns River in central Florida. It was one of many excursion trips for northern tourists looking to trade the cold, crowded streets of industrial cities for the pleasures of a pristine tropical wilderness. Aboard the steamer was a wealthy 33-year-old Philadelphian named Hamilton Diston on his first visit to Florida. A restless entrepreneur who soon would inherit his father's lucrative saw manufactory, Diston had come to fish. But in the wilds of central Florida, he saw a spectacular business opportunity.
Hamilton Diston has this vision of Florida as a place that will make him even more wealthy than what he is. And in the late 19th century, the American heroes of the day are people like Rockefeller and Carnegie and Vanderbilt, businessmen. Florida, it's a paradise for the sportsmen and women, but it's also an opportunity for the businessman.
This was a way for this heir to an industrial fortune who had always lived in his dad's shadow to kind of step out and create something that was truly his.
Where Diston saw potential, most others saw an insurmountable obstacle, a massive wetland known as the Everglades that covered much of Florida's southern half, inhibiting settlement and development. We want immigration and capital, Florida's governor admitted, come from whatever source it may. Diston was sure he could deliver both by turning the Everglades into dry land.
Hamilton Diston had this very simple, grand vision. He was going to transform this wasteland into the new hub of America. People saw it as man's duty to conquer the wilderness. The people who talked about draining the Everglades and reclaiming the Everglades and improving the Everglades, they thought they were literally doing God's work. They thought that they were taking this useless swamp and turning it into something productive for mankind.
In 1881, Diston cut a deal to purchase 4 million acres of the Everglades for $1 million in cash, enough to pull Florida out of its post-Civil War debt. He also promised to drain 12 million acres, 1/3 of the state's landmass, in exchange for half the land his dredges successfully reclaimed. One local newspaper predicted the project would give Florida the most vigorous push forward on the road to progress that it has yet received. When asked why he'd chosen to invest in such a colossal undertaking, Diston replied, "The truth is, I wanted a plaything. I am having a vast amount of fun with it."
Hamilton Diston was really the first guy who made a serious effort to drain it. His drainage scheme was at the time considered the most ambitious drainage project in the history of the planet. There had never been this kind of assault on an entire landscape.
Hamilton Diston is not just simply one of Florida's early big real estate developers. He's one of its early boosters. His vision was to drain this land, turn around and sell it. To get the word out, he invited President Chester Arthur down to Florida for a tour of his, if you will, kingdom, and took Chester Arthur on a boat ride down the Caloosahatchee River. And so he's generating this excitement about Florida and Florida land.
Soon, pioneers began venturing to the fringes of the Everglades. The cow town of Fort Myers, the base for Diston's dredging operation on the west side of the peninsula, tripled in population almost overnight. Thomas Edison, lured by the fishing, bought a winter home there, prophesying that there is only one Fort Myers, and one day, 90 million people are going to find it out. Diston's dredges, meanwhile, were busily carving drainage canals through the sawgrass marshes. Within 2 years, water levels in some areas had reached record lows, opening pastures and grazing land for cattle. Bullish on the prospects for agriculture in the region, Diston established an 1,800-acre sugar plantation and generated impressive yields.
The tropics was a vitally important environmental region, both from a biological standpoint and increasingly from an agricultural standpoint. Things like sugar and citrus, which could be produced in ways that they couldn't be in most of the rest of the continental United States.
Diston was trying all these ventures, little towns that he was planning and bringing people in to live, selling land and sugar as a capitalist. He was there to demonstrate that South Florida, and not just South Florida, but drained land in the Everglades, could be made productive and profitable.